there, fans of the Survivor Super Fun Time Show. This is Kevin from the Super Fun Time Show, and we had another excellent episode of Survivor. This time around, it's the premiere of Survivor 47. Okay, I did call it excellent a second ago, but I don't know if that's entirely true. I have to admit, there were parts of the episode where I actually felt pretty bored, and there's some key ones that I'll point out. Now, I will say, if you've seen some of my pre-show stuff, there's certain people I really was looking forward to. Some people I thought I was really going to like a lot. Some people, I was like, I already know they do not have long for this world. And other people I had no feeling for that I now love. And I can't wait to talk about them with you a little bit more. First, I want to say, though, make sure to hit the subscribe button to this channel. This is an ever-growing community, ever-growing channel, and I would appreciate your support as I continue to make videos throughout Survivor 47. We're going to have castaways on to recap episodes. We possibly even have some fun games. I have some awesome ideas cooked up. Getting into the episode itself, Survivor 47, another season. We're getting up on our damn horse once again to maybe get kicked in the teeth, but who knows? If the episode 1 is any kind of precursor to what's coming on, yeah, we may have some issues this season. Game starts off. This was interesting because this season is kind of set up so that there's like a ton of podcasters. You got John, who's a podcaster. He's the host of a podcast called Pod Saves America. I've never personally listened to it, but a lot of people in the Internet Survivor fandom, huge fans of John Lovett. You have Asia, who is a member of Rob Has a Podcast, which if you're an Internet Survivor fan, you probably listen to Rob Has a Podcast. And then the other folks, I mean, Rome, he is an esports commentator, and that's like his own form of podcasting, I suppose. I mean, there's just a lot of people who like to get on a microphone and yap it up. Some obnoxious people like to get on the microphone and yap it up. But anyway, not to talk about the podcast stuff too much. You know, the tribes all get together. They have the yellow tribe, Gaeta, which obviously is going to be a cursed tribe. We should all know this. And now, of course, following suit, the yellow tribe has to be the weird one in the first episode of the season. Then you have the blue tribe, Tuku, which actually performed pretty well throughout the episode, but I think it was pretty clear they're probably going to be the buffoon tribe long term. So we'll see how that shakes out. A lot of interesting, unique, different personalities that are probably going to go in completely different directions in only one episode. And then you have the red tribe, which is the Lavo tribe. And this is the one that I think looks the most cohesive and ultimately is probably going to stick together the best. And I think they'll stay out of tribal council in the pre-merge. However, like we've seen from so many examples in the past, if there's a tribe that doesn't really go to tribal council very much in the pre-merge, they usually end up at a disadvantage, which is really fascinating. Move on, but they immediately have a challenge. And this challenge, you have to go through a mud pit, they have to go get pieces, they have to bring them back and put together a cube. It's always a cube, it seems. And there's like one thing that I will never understand about New Era. Is there like a rule? Any castaway who watches this, is there a rule that you can't take your shirt off for the first challenge? Like, I don't get it. I sit here, I watch these challenges every single time, and I say to myself, why aren't the dudes popping off their shirts? Okay? Like, I don't want to see them pop off the shirts, but I want to see you pop off your shirt. It seems like that's what you have to do in order to be a little bit faster, a little more aerodynamic or hydrodynamic, whatever it is when it's in the water. I don't get it because like you have everyone kept it on. Later on in the episode, in the immunity challenge, I think for the most part, only Gaeta popped off their shirts. Like all the dudes popped them off, except for Jedi Master Soul, of course, who is built like a friggin' bull. But anyway, I digress. They do the challenge, they go through the mud, they have a big sprint into the woods, bring their pieces back, where the ultimate winner is going to be Gaeta, or Gata, if you want to be the high influence man out there. They win their supplies, they go back. That means the other two tribes have to get their supplies, and as a New Era fan, we know what comes next. Sweater Savvy! Except not this time. Instead, it's a hero challenge. One member from each of the tribes has to send a representative to go to a journey, essentially. They get there and they find out that it is going to be a challenge facing off against one another, and only one team is going to get their supplies. How they chose them, Asia just chose themselves to go in, and which you could argue that was a mistake. But by the end of the episode, it looks like that's not the case. Then for Tuku, they play rock, paper, scissors, and TK plays his own version of it, apparently, and he wins. So TK and Asia go, and they realize they have to compete against one another in some scavenger hunt. I did not like the scavenger hunt. I watched it. I like the idea that they were against each other, I suppose. A positive is they ended up getting their supplies, so we don't feel like we watched a scavenger hunt or a challenge for no reason, just like Sweater Savvy the last couple seasons. So there is that, and I did enjoy Asia wanting to fight with TK in the water, like kind of informally, like like, oh yeah, I'm gonna come get that. Ugh. But obviously she was never gonna get it from TK. That dude is a monster. He's a freak. TK got it, brought it back to the tribe, and he's got his supplies, his pot and Shetty, and everyone is nice and happy. And the bros are loving TK in that moment, and the girls catch on. Obviously starting a little bit of a divide right away. But I'll talk about those dynamics a little bit later. Asia comes back with nothing, tells him straight up, we competed, I lost. But while Asia was gone, the dynamics of that tribe were very interesting because so many of the people were starting to form alliances right away. Teeny being one of the ones that was really pushing some of the alliance forming in the game. I think Teeny's a really big fan of their own social skills and thinks it's really going to carry them on. Definitely reminds me of Izzy from Big Brother 25 for anyone who's watched that. Because of that, I also feel a similar downfall for Teeny. I've not had a good feeling about Teeny since the offseason, and I haven't had a good feeling about Sam since the offseason. However, Sam on the Gated Tribe has actually made me feel a little bit better after this premiere episode, and his social media posting makes me feel maybe he was going to do well. But Teeny, I'm not sure. I don't really have a great read on. There was one massive thing that Teeny did during this episode that I consider to be a huge red flag as a player. And if I caught it as a fan, I would hope they would have caught it out there. While forming alliances, Teeny was talking to Keyshawn and Genevieve saying like, all right, us three, we're going to be locked in for an alliance. And they were trying to figure out what the fourth would be. And Teeny at one point said something like, remember, Asia's not here yet, and I'd like to leave that slot open for her to see if she ends up being the one to be a part of it. Now, if I'm the person on the other end of that conversation, I would say, why are you leaving this open? Let's lock it in right now. Screw Asia. Who cares? We need to say, at the very least, I feel as though you have to say, yeah, absolutely. And then move on from there. Maybe Asia will be included later on. But in that moment, saying no, let's leave it open for Asia. If I'm the person on the other end, I'm like, why isn't Teeny rolling with this? I don't know. It feels weird. It feels like she's already, Teeny's trying to move the pieces in one direction immediately. And, having your will be known. And I think agency is good. However, right away, when people are like, I'm handing you the majority, I think you just roll with it after vote one, and then that's it. I mean, that could be too oversimplistic, and maybe Teeny made exactly the right move. But it feels like you should have just picked a fourth person and moved on. And interestingly, at least we saw in a confessional, Rome was not a big fan of Asia volunteering to go and get the supplies. He said, listen, you don't volunteer for the journey right away, because if you go away and you win, great, you lost out on all the conversations during that time. But if you lose and come back, you lost out on all the conversations and you don't get anything. You don't bring anything, and people think you have an idol anyway. Now, I think Rome was absolutely 100% correct. However, he needs to take his own advice, because right away he started fearlessly looking for a hidden immunity idol. And he found the Beware Advantage eventually. He did. And he started, searching around, and Clue got him to the point where he had to dive into a well to get the keys to open up the chest. And I thought that was a really funny sequence. Him being aware that if he had to reach into the well, it's going to be gross for people to drink out of. I wonder if people knew he was in the water, because the rest of the tribe caught him. However, I don't know if they realized he was wet from actually diving in the well, which is amazing. I love that. But Rome is everything I expected him to be so far. He's aggressive. He's kind of loud. He's got that charm. However, people see through his charm. Everything that's happened so far, I fully saw coming from this guy. So I think it's interesting to see how his game is shaping up, and that it looks like he's very much on the outside of the Lavo tribe, to the point where Asia said, I think he's going to be the first gone, but I'm worried about him having an idol. Smart on her part, because it looks like that is going to be a reality pretty soon. He did leave the episode without opening up the chest, but Rome has shown a little bit of patience among kind of the eagerness and chaos that he has. And speaking of idols being found, Gabe, somebody who going into the season, I considered him to be a guy who was going to be too over the top, a little too aggressive, focusing on charm, but maybe lacking in the charm that he may think he has. And he really hit the ground running. He started to make an alliance immediately with Sue, said, I want to work with an older woman, which is very fascinating. I think it's like cuckoo, kachoo, Mrs. Robinson. And I thought it was interesting because, they were starting to form that bond, and Sue has to say yes in that moment. But later on in the episode, Caroline of the tribe was also saying, hey, I want to work with you, Sue. So Sue apparently is the prettiest girl at the ball. And good spot for Sue to be in, because I think a lot of fans going into the season were like, I don't know about this Sue stuff. But the reality is, older women in New Era Survivor do extremely well. 47 may be shaping up for it to be the Sue season as far as getting to the end of the game. And it could be really exciting. One thing that could prevent her, though, is her first alliance mate, Gabe. This guy, I think, even though he ended up finding the Beware advantage just like Rome, completing the first step and then completing the second step, because as we know now, once you get the Beware advantage and you open up the chest, there's another little chest inside of it, and you can donate your idol in order to get an idol that will work for up to 3 tribal councils instead of just 1. And then, once you get that, there's another little box inside where you can donate the idol again to get an idol that will last until the final 5. Now, Gabe, he completed step 1, and for the second one, he completed that too. However, he did not take the risk and get the idol that would go to the final 5. So he has an idol that's good for 3 tribal councils. My guess is, based on how this will go, he probably is going to be safe until merge time. I would think Mergatory is when it would run out. Just my forecast of the future. So Gabe is going to have the opportunity to really navigate through this game in a big way. However, if his idol finding is any indication of how he's going to play the game, Sue needs to run far away because he's smart and he's ambitious, but he is clunky. That is what I'm getting from it, at least. He's opening up the box the final time, and he drops it down the hill, and it's making a bunch of noise where the castaways are like, yeah, there's nothing that he'd be dropping that would make that noise. Not like bamboo or anything like that, or wood. So I'm sure, even though it wasn't totally on screen, they know he was doing something nefarious. And Sue has too many options to be stuck to Gabe. And I think Gabe is going to get blindsided. That's what I see in the future. We'll see. And we haven't talked about Gaeta all that much, but Gaeta was really interesting because starting off, John is this popular figure, John Lovett. He's like, yeah, I have a big podcast with, a pretty big following. And he tells them, and, he said, did anyone follow it? They're like, no. And he's like, oh, great. But funny enough, Asia was recognized by Teeny for being on Rob Has a Podcast. And I tell you, Survivor is not beating the allegations that New Era Survivor is made for specific fans. I mean, the fact that John Lovett wasn't really recognized, but somehow Rob Has a Podcast got a shout out in this episode. I mean, it feels really clear, even if that's not exactly the case, because I always thought Jeff Probst kind of had an adversarial relationship with Rob Cesarnino, similar to Adam Klein for his casting advice. It was really interesting to see that shake out. That was one of the cool kind of dynamics there. John really trying to ingratiate himself with the women of the tribe, which I cannot tell you enough how much I love the girls of Gata or Gaeta, the Gaeta girls. I can't tell you enough, because going into this season, I was like, Rachel will probably be cool. Sierra, I already love. She's from the Phoenixville area. Well, Delaware originally, but Phoenixville, Pennsylvania area, which is near my area. And then for Annika, honestly, I didn't know. I wasn't really sure about anything. However, Annika is a badass. Then you have Rachel, another badass. And Sierra, I already knew was a badass. All 3 of them are badasses. This may be my favorite threesome group of women of the new era so far. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, we'll see how it shakes out, but definitely top tier. Sam is more or less kind of what I thought he was, except he's less alpha and more fun and humorous, which I'm excited about. Andy is more or less what I thought as well. He's definitely more of like a big nerd than I thought he would be, and that's okay. There's a lot that I identify with Andy myself. Not exactly the same, but there are moments where I could see like his brain working through his eyes. And to some degree, that's the same thing with me. So I thought that was really sweet, but there's obviously a lot more to talk about with Andy a little bit later on in this recap, and we'll do that. But the other one, John, I didn't really feel much about John. John has good one-liners. Obviously, he's like ready to be the new Johnny Cochran of Survivor 47, where he's giving these brilliant confessionals. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite end up that way. I did think it was really interesting that Andy going through the mathematics of trying to be safe in the first episode. It was interesting to see that like one of his first connection points is to talk about John, like, hey, hey, John, I'm bi, you're gay. Boom. It's important to have those different touch points, and that's a unique card he can play versus probably anyone else on the tribe. So that is interesting, but it's funny when you're watching it as a viewer, you're like, man, I need to get people on my side. By the way, I like girls and boys. Get on my side. I don't know. I thought it was kind of funny. That's Survivor. It's the ultimate social experiment. And, some people like to go for people that, have something in common. So I thought that was cool. But the dynamics of the tribes are ever shifting, and none of that really matters until you get to the immunity challenge. You get to the immunity challenge, and, obviously it's a big obstacle course situation. You start in the water. You have to get chests on your boat. Everyone's boats flip and makes it really difficult. But the one that really stands out is the Lavo tribe, the red tribe. And the thing that stood out for me right away was freaking Soul. Soul is a beast, dude. They were getting that boat up the sand up on the beach. And dude, when he was pulling it, his biceps flexed into the ozone. Like, this dude is a monster. And I love it. He didn't get to speak very much in the episode. He's one of the people that I can't wait to see play the game. But he did not speak much in the episode. I pray he's not like a Sifu, who is a character and doesn't really get to talk too much. But I hope for better for this guy. And I think it will be. I think it will be. But he really helped propel the tribe to get to the puzzle first. And they built their puzzle in the edit in like immediately, like absolutely instantaneously. Also, I'd like to say, as I'm filming this review right now, Soul just followed me on Twitter. What a time to be alive. It's over. So congratulations, Lavo. You are safe from getting voted out tonight. However, there's one more spot up for grabs. You have Tuku going at it against the Gata tribe. And they're going back and forth, back and forth. And Andy in the background is like falling apart. He's crumbling because I guess Gata was losing. And he goes to lay down, and Probst is like insulting the Gata tribe. It's really funny. He was like, yeah, I think you gotta go to tribal council tonight. It was awesome. I love when Probst gets to be spicy. And then once he was done roasting, he's like, oh shit, Andy's on the floor. And he starts going like, Andy, you chilling or you hurt? And Andy just, beginning of the meltdown. I know he was overheated and he was probably losing it a little bit, but he was like, I gave everything I had, Jeff. Like he was already out of the game. And, over and over, he was loopy. What I did love about this was an appearance from Dr. Joe. Dr. Joe hasn't been on Survivor in a long time. I thought he was out of there. So seeing Dr. Joe, that was a really fun little moment, like a little Survivor Easter egg for one of these big fans out here, like myself. See him cool down Andy. Now, of course, in the meantime, the Gata tribe ends up losing to Tuku. Tuku wins. The blue tribe and the red tribe are safe. But they have to pick up the pieces now with Andy having a little bit of a meltdown. Mind you, this is Andy, the person going into the season who was considered my favorite, and I still like him a lot. However, I would say after this little bit, he probably lost a little bit of his chances to win the game. They get on the mats. They ask, the condition of how Andy's doing, and Andy said, I was fine. I'm getting there. And he starts talking about how he can tell the rest of the tribe doesn't really like him. And he was freaking out a little bit. He was having an anxiety attack, which is a very serious thing. But boy, was it the worst time possible to have this. And he was just word vomiting over and over and over again. And he said, my best friend out here, John, I was going to throw him under the bus and to save himself in the game because he wasn't quitting. He was fighting. However, his form of fighting is really fighting with himself on that mat, which I thought was interesting to watch, to the point where the other tribe, like Tiana, was saying like, stop, boy, stop. And he just couldn't do it. And he kept talking. And I think everyone sat there watching this episode, like myself, and said, yeah, I think Andy's probably not going to last past this episode. They go back to camp. Everyone is trying to make Andy feel a little bit better. Andy's trying to make himself feel better. But, I mean, who's not nervous at this viewpoint? I think John was actually really gracious about the situation, considering he was the one that was thrown under the bus by Andy. Lots of conversations where essentially the girls kind of decide how this vote's going to go. Sam, more or less, was going along with them. And it seemed like Andy at first, but then they said, John, probably a little too popular, probably too good at talking with people. maybe we need to get rid of him because Andy is also physically a lot stronger. But they get to tribal council, lots of discussion, obviously, about the tribal dynamics and about what Andy said in this situation. But it boiled down to ultimately John getting voted out 5-1 in a decisive victory. I mean, it's pretty impressive that John was voted out first. And that was something that I saw very easily as something that would happen. I mean, I predicted it ahead of time. I said, in this tribe makeup, I can see very quickly John being outcast as the small mousy guy. It's like Zach Wertenberger from 42. I mean, it seemed pretty clear that could happen again very fast. And I wasn't sure. I thought Yellow was probably going to win the first immunity challenge, but since he didn't, he was easily a target right away. And it's a shame because I have a lot of friends who are really big fans of John Lovett, it seems. He didn't mean anything to me, but I will admit, super witty, and he seems like he would have been really good for confessionals for the rest of the season. So I can only hope that maybe he makes a return one day. Maybe this was all worth it. I'm hoping Andy finds the Beware advantage and Andy ends up turning this around for himself because I think Andy seems like a really nice guy and he could do well. I mean, he even had his own Disney Channel original movie moment where he got to draw equations on the screen. And I thought that was really fun. And I can only hope for the best for him moving forward. People who definitely got stock upgrades from preseason to current in-season. Annika, definitely. I think she seems like she's going to be brilliant. Rachel, another huge upgrade. Absolutely seems like they're going to be great. A downgrade for me was Keyshawn. In going into the season, I felt really good about Keyshawn and how they'd play the middle. Right now, I don't like how much they talked about being a doctor. That kind of threw me off. However, I do like that they're wearing a shirt that looks like it's from Marine Layer, a company I enjoy. Teeny, still can't quite put my finger on Teeny. TK. I like TK. TK is different than I expected, but I think he's not someone I would trust to actually win the game at any point. He's not a horse I would back. I think he'll be strong in challenges and stuff, but I'm not sure it's going to be there. To me, he's like a Ryan Madrino from Survivor 43. I think he'll be good and he'll be useful. However, I don't think he'll be any more than a number. I don't think he'll be a driver in the game. I hope I'm wrong, though. TK seems really cool. Really impressed with how Sue got footing in her trial. I was afraid she wouldn't, even though I thought she could stick around and have a long game, kind of like Carolyn Weiger being kind of the older woman of Survivor 44. I was afraid Sue wouldn't be able to do that, but Sue, I think, is so much of a badass that she's going to be able to, and I love that. She's going to be able to get a foothold in the game. That's going to do it for the episode. What did you think of this premiere? Did you think it was good? Think it was great? I was falling asleep at different points. I don't love premiere episodes that start off with a disaster. I think that this is kind of a formula that Probst likes to use these days in the new era, if I'm being honest about it. However, I think it only has up to go. I think Survivor is really good at telling a story. I usually don't like the very beginning of the story. People who love Survivor 46 by the end, most of them did not like it in the beginning of Survivor 46. So remember that for anyone who thinks that this is a disaster that has never been seen before in the new era, they've got short memories. Most fans of the new era have memories of a goldfish, and they say, oh my God, I can't believe Andy's meltdown, and mock him, which, by the way, is messed up. But they don't think about Banu last year and his meltdowns, or even the year before that, Hannah Rose and her meltdown that ended up having her quit the game. I mean, it happens all the time, and I don't think it should be normalized, but it is. So remember to adjust your expectations. Moving forward, I'm sure the game's only going to get better, and hopefully more Jedi Master Soul. But again, that's going to do it. Hope you have an amazing day, everyone. You take care, and goodbye, everybody.